For a lot of my life, I was walking around as a shell of myself, too afraid to fully encompass all of who I was and who I was becoming, even in those shaky parts. I never said it with my chest. I never stood 10 toes down. But now I am graciously embodied, and that really means I'm fully in my person. I'm giving myself grace for those days where I'm like, yo, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm not feeling myself for whatever reason. I'm not where I want to be financially, emotionally, or what have you. You know, those days where you're just not on 10. But I'm allowing myself to say, it's okay. I've learned how to reparent myself. I think right now, I would say like I'm resting mentally. Finally having a time to like purposely slow down is a good thing. Like today I observed the Sabbath, so I'm trying to quiet my mind. And it's a work in progress. Like, I'm not even gonna lie.
Yeah.
So in terms of me chilling, it's just being intentionally on rest mode so as not to like worry about any outside issues or stressors. So yeah, I'm on chill mode today.
That's nice. I want to ask,
Yeah.
how did you find us?
I walk past like Black Ivy a lot. I visited it when it was like Grant Boulevard, and I like made friends with Camille. She's really cool.
Yeah.
And about, let me see, like a week before my book released in June, Camille and I were just talking, and I was saying that I wanted to kind of bring awareness to the book and like promote it. And she goes, oh my gosh, like I know someone. And she told me about you. And it must have been like a couple of days later that I reached out in terms of just wanting to spread awareness about what I was talking about in the book. And yeah, that's how I came across
That's
you.
awesome.
Yeah. So Camille, thank you. She's so dope.
Oh yeah,
honestly.
she's amazing. She's a great person to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask, when you were writing this book, who were you writing it for?
Me. I wrote it to purge. I know that I needed to heal from a lot of the childhood trauma that I dealt with, and I knew that in addition to like meditating and praying and doing therapy, I needed to write my story and really be vocal about it and unashamed. So this was a healing project for myself to just get it all out, because I noticed I was constantly like talking about whatever I've gone through, and I've been doing personal development since my son was 5 months old. And I would like unofficially coach people before I officially became a coach. And every time I spoke to someone, they kept saying like, you should write a book, like you should tell your story. And I kind of took it like off the cuff and didn't do anything with it. Like I would write blogs and continue doing whatever I was doing. But in terms of like actually sitting down and writing a book was something that I finally put into practice in 2017. So I would think to say that writing the book was just like a natural progression of me organically telling my story in different ways, but having the discipline and the fortitude to actually do it. Yeah, so it was a work in progress, like getting to that point of deciding, okay, we're gonna do this and we're gonna take it seriously. Yeah.
How are you different now from when you first began to think of the idea of, I want to tell my story?
I would say now more grounded. I am less hurt, or I would say I'm less affected by the pain because I've done a lot of the healing work, a lot of the ugly work, a lot of the tough conversations with people who hurt me, as opposed to with myself, and I guess the failed expectations that I had of my parents. And that was pivotal. I would say I'm different because I had those heartbreaking, heart-to-heart conversations with the people who were my source, my parents. So that's where it all stemmed from. And I had to go there to fix it in a very loose way of saying it, because you can't really fix anything, but you can approach things differently. So I would say now I'm in a more meditative space, because it took a lot of healing and growth from the time I started to get here. Like, I had to forgive. I had to reconcile that some things may never change.
Yeah.
And I have to be okay with that. And then some things do change, and I have to learn how to kind of navigate these new relationships that I was like, all right, F it. Like, if it ain't working, okay, I'm cool over here. I love you from afar. Like, I went through my whole F you mode, and God, his grace kind of like mellowed that out. But I had to go through what I was going through and not sugarcoat anything. I had to be where I was, how I was, in order to evolve into who I am today. So yeah.
I do want to say I am starstruck, because I read the book and I feel like I'm sitting next to a celebrity. So like,
Oh my God.
I feel like I know everything, but I also want you to say it in your own words.
Oh my gosh.
I want you to take me through the first chapter of the book. The first chapter of the book was detailing your younger self.
Yeah.
I want you to take me through who your younger self was.
So I messed up. I think that was the title of the first chapter. And I was 3 years old and my parents were together. So that's the earliest memory I have of them being together. I was cognizant that they were in the house, and that's the earliest memory I have of them being separated. And as a mom, the fundamental stages of your children are so vital. So even going back and writing about who I was at 3 years old and having the world kind of crumble, that messes up with how you function. It, like, your foundation is kind of torn. So as a young child, I was creative, talented, but always had this level of sadness that I couldn't explain. I would do poetry in church. I would always jump double dutch. Like, I was a happy and creative child, but always had this level of, I don't want to say disdain, but knowing that something was missing and I couldn't quite articulate it. So as a young child, I would say that I was passive aggressive. I learned how to say it's okay when it wasn't. I learned how to justify their divorce. I kept saying, okay, well, they had to do it. It wasn't working out. And I overcompensated for what I was feeling, because I didn't want to be sad. I wanted to be happy like other kids were. I wanted to be in that two-family household, and I wasn't. So I made myself pretend to be happy to cover up this sadness that everyone kind of frowned upon. Like, yo, what's wrong with you? And I didn't know what was wrong with me. I'm 38 years old and I can perfectly, not even perfectly, I can articulate how I feel. But as a young child, I was searching. I would really personify my childhood with searching for something that I couldn't find. And that's it. Yeah, that's the sum of it all.
And then I want you to take me through your teenage years, starting to grow and starting to be self-conscious, starting to be body conscious. Those feelings you were feeling, what were they like? And especially in 2003, I think I was 3 years old, so I don't even know what that's like.
Yeah, so as a teenager, okay, so I grew up in the church, and my mom, we were Catholic up until, I would say, 3rd grade, and then we transitioned into being Seventh-day Adventists. And with that religion, there's a lot of restriction, I want to say, for lack of a better term, on what you can and you cannot do. So when it comes to learning about my body and accepting it, I was very self-conscious. Like, I had to cover up everything or else my mom would be giving me the side eye like, your butt's not covered, or this is too tight, like where you going? And before you go to church, you're me. I'm constantly worried about, am I showing too much? Like, is the pastor gonna be like slut shaming from the pulpit? Like, yo, I've been through a lot of those sermons where women are constantly targeted for how they look to appease men's comfort. And I'm not saying that being modest is a bad thing, but women, we had a lot of the onus of guilt associated with how we dressed, and it wasn't fair. So as a teenager growing up and trying to accept my body for how it was and love that was difficult because of the dogma in church, like because a lot of that, and because my mom wasn't accepting of herself. And my mom is beautiful. Like, I remember being my son's age thinking, oh my gosh, I want a body like yours. And she was never comfortable with herself. So it's the insecurity, it's the judgment, it's the condemnation. Navigating all of that made me very self-conscious. It didn't stop me from like kissing my boyfriend or like, you know, I don't want to say acting up, but like messing around. So I did explore my body in teenage ways. You can fill in the blanks. But I wasn't always comfortable with myself. It wasn't until I hit like my 30s that I came a little bit more confident in my womanhood. So it was a struggle. I always thought I was too skinny, always got made fun of, and I was never comfortable at all with my body.
When I first met you, I first greeted your son, Caleb. How has all your relationships put together sort of affected your other relationships, particularly with your son?
How did my relationship with him affect?
Relationship with your parents, relationship with Darius, relationships with, you know, your family members, relationship with your dad not being there. How did it affect you raising your son?
Wow. Growing up from a household that was broken, I told myself I wouldn't be that. I'm never gonna be a single mom. I'm never gonna get a divorce. I was running away from everything I grew up on, but ended up running to it. So in terms of how I was affected, I was adamant on not repeating cycles. I always wanted to get it right. I was a perfectionist, and I also was extremely self-critical. So when I wasn't perfect or doing the right things, I beat myself up. So in terms of, you know, the source relationships, I was always searching for something I couldn't find. And because of that, I decided to be better for my son. I decided to really look at myself and say, yo, I'm a mess and I can't fix this on my own. I can't get to a better place. So God, like, help me. And I leaned on God even more because I felt helpless. I felt like a wanderer. Like in relationships, I was wandering. I was with a lot of men who are emotionally disconnected, like my father. He was charming. He was, I would say, kind, but inconsistent. Like when I was younger and he would take me around other people, I was treated as a token. The pretty girl, the good girl. And I didn't want to be known as just being pretty. I'm like, okay, yeah, but do you see me? So having felt invisible was kind of this cloak that I carried everywhere. I felt invisible in my relationships with men, except for one relationship. But I internalized a lot of, I guess, their trauma because they didn't heal. And I observed their unhealed selves and how they handle situations. And I said I wouldn't do it, but I didn't know how not to do it. So me not really knowing how to navigate life in a healthy way, romantically, spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally, kind of led me down a path of like spiraling or allowing people in my life who didn't belong there. So my relationships growing up affected every area of my life because I would say I was underdeveloped. But I chose to do things differently because I didn't want to keep going in that direction. And in terms of having dated someone who had so much control over you, I couldn't do it anymore. Like, I literally felt like I was going crazy. So in bringing another life into the world, I said I had to do better. I didn't know how, but I knew that something just had to change.
I want to ask you.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what is the key theme you want people to take away from the book?
Release. Release. So many things are holding you down. Things that were done to you, things that you may have allowed, things that you don't even know how to name. But if you can learn how to release the guilt, I would say that's the first step. That's the ultimate step. The first step is acknowledging how you feel. Like, feel it. It's okay. A lot of church folk, do that I'm blessed and highly favored stuff when you ask them how they doing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that some of them may not believe that, but just be real. Like, how are you doing today? Like, you challenged me. Today you asked me how I'm doing and I told you I was chilling. And you were like, okay, like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I had to respect it because I wasn't chilling. I was intentionally just trying to be okay. So I would tell people to be honest with themselves and not worry about how people perceive their truth, because you can't allow other people's perceptions of you to kind of dictate how you move in this world. Just keep going, and keep going by showing up for yourself. You don't need to live a life where you're trying to prove yourself or prove other people wrong, because the only person you have to impress is God, and He's accepted you anyway. It's like He knows you, so you don't have to hide. You don't have to pray these ostentatious prayers and try to say the right thing for people to accept you. Be honest. Yeah, so honesty and self-perception are themes that go a long way, because how you perceive yourself translates into how you move in this world. Because if I don't feel that great about myself, I may not have the energy or the wherewithal to sustain a thing. I may not go after my dreams as hard as I could, because I'm like, I ain't worth shit, so why? Why am I gonna do this thing if I don't feel like I even deserve it? And I walked around life like that for a long time. So I would also tell people to say what's on your mind. I struggled and still struggle at times with just telling the truth. I like to be kind and I like to respect people. I don't like to hurt their feelings. But there's some things that just need to be said, and people can take it how they take it. So yeah, I would agree with you that unsilencing is definitely one of the messages. And I wrote a poem to my mom that it didn't make it in the book. I didn't put it there, but I said that I see you. I repeated a lot of the parent patterns that she repeated in terms of just being, I was depressed for a while. And with every relationship that I could reflect on, I can see myself in her. I understand why we were listening to Toni Braxton all the time and those sad love songs, because she was going through it. So I forgave her a long time ago, because I know that she didn't do what she didn't know to do. She operated from her place of understanding, and You can't blame someone for that. Nor will I neglect myself in saying that I'm not going to speak up about how I was affected by people's decisions. Because, as a child, you don't choose who your parents are. You don't choose where you live. Like, you don't really have a choice in a lot of how your life goes. So, I don't blame her for the choices that she made, or even the divorce. Like, I'm like, yo, if a man isn't treating you right, I don't care if he's my father. I'm glad that you're not with him. But even understanding the scope of their relationship and some of the truths that came out after the fact, I said, oh, okay, so there was stuff going on that I wasn't privy to. And nothing is ever, I don't want to say nothing is ever on one person, but things happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a woman, and I'm understanding my mom a lot more. So that's why I wrote the poem to her, just to acknowledge that I'm not mad at you. Because I wrote the book when I was in a very dark place. I started there. And, over the course of 5 years, I've grown, and I wasn't, in year 3, I wasn't as upset as I was in year 1. So I've developed and healed a lot of areas that were hurtful, and I addressed those pain points. So yeah, I feel much better.
I want to add one more.
Yeah.
Empowered. That's how I felt at the very end. Empowered. I was like, okay, maybe, you know what? Maybe I do need to speak out more. Maybe I do need to have people, know my feelings more. So I do want to put that one, empowered.
Amen. I love that.
Now I want to ask you, what is the name of your book?
Behind the Face.
Now, to move on, what is a word or phrase that describes you? Because I can describe one, fashionista. But what is one word or
Thank
I
you.
like that. Thank you. I like that.
Thank you, baby.
There you go.
So I would say embodied. I'm in my person. For a lot of my life, I was walking around as a shell of myself, too afraid to fully encompass all of who I was and who I was becoming, even in those shaky parts. I never said it with my chest. I never stood 10 toes down. But now I am graciously embodied, and that really means I'm fully in my person. Even when I'm not, I'm giving myself grace for those days where I'm like, yo, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm not feeling myself for whatever reason. I'm not where I want to be, financially, emotionally, or what have you. Those days where you're just not on 10. But I'm allowing myself to say, it's okay. I've learned how to reparent myself, how to mother myself, how to father myself. And, people used to tell me Happy Father's Day when I had my son. And in those stages, I was listening to Steve Harvey a lot, and he's real masculine type of macho, like, women, you will never be the man. Stop trying to teach your sons how to be men. So I was on that understanding of, well, I'm not the man, so how could I be a father? But as I grew into my womanhood and not really accepting the rhetoric that some people want to push on everyone, because you don't know everyone's journey, I show up for him. I go to bat for him. I will fight for him. So hell yeah, you could tell me Happy Father's Day, because I'm showing up in places that other people aren't filling the void. So I'm not going to sit here and knock myself and acquiesce to the narrative when I'm filling those gaps. I'm like, okay, I will accept that, because I do have to be the masculine sometimes. I'm not saying I'm a man, but I have to show up, and I have to provide, and I have to protect, because I am the sole caregiver for my son. So when it comes to like operating in my feminine and nurturing him, being that safe place for him, because I had to work on this through therapy. I had to learn how to be a mom because there were spaces where motherhood wasn't taught to me as fully and as developed as how it could have been.
Yeah.
So I had to fill in the gaps. So you're telling me I'm doing all this spiritual work, I'm doing all this mental work, I'm doing all this physical work, because when I tell you how my weight was like, yo, I was like 20 to 30 pounds thinner than I am now because of stress. So I'm doing all of this work to get back to a healthy version of me, and I'm not gonna take credit for what I'm doing? That doesn't make sense. So you can tell me Happy Father's Day. Thank you. Happy Mother's Day. Thank you to that too, because I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I don't give myself a lot of credit for what I do because I feel like I don't deserve it. So I would definitely learn how to acknowledge myself and be a better parent to me. Yeah.
I want to ask you, what are some short-term goals and some long-term goals? Because your son just mentioned you want to be a fashion designer, you're an aspiring model. So what are some short-term and long-term goals?
That's good. So short-term is my fashion line. I have my LLC already, and I want to be able to invest in the different designs that I've already created. I've already spoken to like the wholesale dealership about, I want to be able to physically and financially invest in that so that I could start putting them out there, because I'm more of like a street style, sophisticated, elegant type of fashion type, and I want that to materialize. I've been drawing since I was 7 years old, and I want to connect with people in a way that I express myself the most freely. And fashion is how I show up in a fierce way. I love to just put things together. I love the way it makes me feel. I love the confidence that I have when I look good. And I want women to know that you can do whatever you want in life. Like, you can do it. It doesn't matter that you're in court today because of legal issues, or you're dealing with a parent who's difficult, or you're on food stamps, or you're struggling. Like, yo, people go through hell, and I don't even want to overlook that. So having been a person who's been through everything I described, having a fashion line would show me that I made it. It's like, yo, you said you wanted to do a thing and you didn't let anything stop you. So my why is kind of me. It's an ode to my younger self who wanted to do something, and my older self is saying, I got you, babe. I got you. So that's a short-term goal, because I feel like it's within reach, and I've already made steps towards that. Long-term, marriage. That's a goal. I want to create a life with someone who I love.